So, COP obviously going on in Egypt at the moment, and Xi Jinping of China, that's the world's largest emitter of greenhouse gases. Xi Jinping is not attending. Narendra Modi of India, the third largest emitter, he is not attending. And, of course, Putin from Russia, the fourth largest emitter, he is not attending either. Caroline.
Well, Richard, I wish they were attending. I'm glad that our Prime Minister finally did his U-turn and did turn up. But essentially, I would argue that this COP process, hugely flawed though it is the only game in town when it comes to having a place where countries of the global south and countries of the global north can come together on some level of equality. That's certainly what the leaders of some of the countries from the south would tell you, that this is one of those places where they do have some leverage. But look, it couldn't be more important. We've just had the UN Secretary General saying in no uncertain terms that we are on a highway to climate hell and the foot is still on the accelerator. And we know that if you look at what governments are planning to do across the world, they're planning to produce more than twice the amount of fossil fuels that would be compatible with staying below 1.5 degrees. So it is massively important that there is an agreement at this COP27 meeting.
And how optimistic are you, Caroline? Because also we had COP26 last year and lots of pledges were made. Few of those pledges have actually come to pass. So how optimistic are you feeling about this one?
I come back to my point to Richard in a way that it is the only game in town. I mean, there's plenty of reasons to be looking at why one would feel depressed. You're right. I mean, the UK as well. I mean, there's such a gap between what politicians are saying and what they're doing. So we had Rishi Sunak claiming that he's going to go faster, but yet what he's doing is green-lighting yet more oil and gas. He's refusing to rule out a new coal mine of all things. He's still going ahead with fossil fuel subsidies, even though that was meant to be ruled out at the last COP. So you can understand why there's so much disillusion with the process, but it is the only one we've got. And the bottom line is that we have to keep fossil fuels in the ground. The International Energy Agency is saying to us loudly and clearly that if we're serious about staying below 1.5, there can be no new exploration of more oil and gas. And that has got to be what the prize is at COP27, and it will require the richer countries to put some money on the table because trust is at a premium, and many countries in the south don't have trust because so many of the richer countries, including ourselves, haven't been delivering on the financial pledges that we've been making. So I don't underestimate the huge task that is ahead of us. But there are also so many opportunities if we get this right. The number of green jobs, for example, that can be created if instead of chasing dreams of more nuclear power or yet more extraction of oil and gas from the North Sea, why don't we put that money into a real green transformation? The home insulation that we are crying out for, which would be the far quickest, cheapest, most effective way of getting energy bills down, rather than chasing after more gas, which is 9 times more expensive than renewables. So although we are at this critical moment, as the UN Secretary General says, there are also real opportunities to create better lives here for everybody. And that, I think, has got to be the spur going forward.
And Stephanie, what about the economics of this? Because, I mean, several years ago now, I think it was 2009, the developed countries pledged a certain amount to less developed countries to help them cope with climate change. I think it was 100 billion. That target still hasn't been met. And now there's talk about a number of mitigations. There's loss and damage. Some people are calling it reparations, which is money to give to countries to help them recover from the impacts already felt of climate change. Rishi Sunak has said that that's not something the government's going to be paying, that they will possibly be paying other things.
It is a hugely flawed process for all the reasons that we know. And just the institutions, the political institutions of each individual country that are represented or not represented at COP are probably none of them a match for the scale and the degree of the long-term nature of this challenge. You know, we've learnt that again and again in different countries. But I do think, I mean, I sort of agree with Caroline that we have to also look at the positive things that have come out of that flawed process, because it is partly the only game in town. And also some of the unexpected things, or at least positive things, that are coming out of the countries, even if China's not there, India's not there. In the US, you've had this ludicrously entitled Inflation Reduction Act, but it is actually largely about green jobs and the most important bit of environmental legislation that the US has seen in decades.
But we've got the UN saying there is no viable pathway now to keeping
Well,
temperature
credible.
rise.
I think
It's
there's
credible.
credible.
I think there's a real. I think there is a
To
realism.
keeping temperatures below 1.5.
There is a realism around 1.5 degrees, but I think it's sort of odd to say. I mean, I think what's most corrosive in this, from any perspective, whether it's financial, economic, or social, is to give in to fatalism. Even if it is impossible to keep to 1.5. That makes it even more important to try and prevent further tipping points. And I would say, the force of technology that we've seen and the amount of private finance that's gone into, for example, renewables, chasing the technological change that's happening before our eyes, really has produced a lot. I mean, the International Energy Agency this year showed that the increase in renewables coming on stream just this year is equal to the whole of the increase in power production, in electricity power production. If we get into that far faster than they expected, we're way ahead of schedule on that, then some of those we may not get 1.5, but at least at Bloomberg, those who know much more about this than me assure me we are also ruling out some of the worst case scenarios that used to be in that list.
All right. The man there in the check shirt. Yes.
Yes. Quite frankly, this country, we do our bit for climate change. In the G20, we've cut emissions more than any other country. That's the big countries in the world. We're doing our bit. But we can do more. We need to give more money to farmers, to do more environmental schemes, etc., put more solar panels on roofs. There's roofs, there are no solar panels, just whack them up. But we're doing our bit. We can do more, but we also need to bring the public with us to do more. But what's really damaging at the minute is nutters gluing themselves, well, they call themselves activists, I think they're just, something's going on in there. They're gluing themselves onto various motorways and climbing up gantries, but it's not. It's turning the public against it, and I'm seeing it, and you're just...
So you're talking about the Just Stop Oil protesters who frequently...
Well, I don't want to mention them too much.
I don't know. I presume that's who you mean? Who've been on gantries on the M25?
Yeah, but they're turning... I feel like they're going to turn people against climate action. Because we are doing a lot in this country, but the public needs to be for it, and those people, they're just going to turn... they're going to destroy it. I can just see it coming. The public, they're going to vote for some party that really doesn't want it, and it's just going to go up in flames. But they need to stop, and we need to do more, but we need to acknowledge that we are doing our bit and stop being so self-loathing, quite frankly.
OK. The man there with the blonde hair and the black top.
I'm fairly certain Rishi Sunak mentioned that we need to focus on renewable energy to help inflation specifically. Do you think in COP there's any chance that he'll look into offshore wind farms at all? OK, well, you might as well answer that.
So,
offshore wind farms? I presume you mean onshore wind farms, because offshore he is supporting, but it's onshore ones that he's not.
Offshore, we put a huge amount of investment into that.
But
and actually, Caroline, you're against nuclear power, which is a low-carbon form of energy to
which
do base
doesn't
load,
come fast enough.
Hang on. The clue's in the title of this programme, question time. The question from the young man, because actually what you meant was onshore, I think.
Yeah, sorry.
Yes, no, absolutely.
No, so we're
onshore.
prioritising offshore because we've driven down the costs there, exactly as you've said, to deal with the reduction in energy.
So no is the answer to that.
And then that gentleman's point over there about the protesters, I completely agree with him. They're causing an enormous amount of disruption to people trying to go about their lives. That's why last weekend I instructed National Highways to secure a High Court injunction. And this week, we've had a lot of success. The police have got faster at it during the week in terms of getting them off the gantries, getting the roads open again, because what they're arguing for is that the government should take this subject seriously, and we absolutely do. We are a leading country in the world at dealing with climate change. In my department, we've got ambitious plans to roll out electric vehicles, a charging network across the country, decarbonising our transport system, and we've actually made some commitments at COP this week with the US, for example, on trying to drive green technology into shipping.
But if you keep going on with more oil and gas, all of that doesn't matter, Mark. The bottom line is you've got to keep fossil fuels in the ground. That is what is leading to more and more emissions.
Gas is going to be a transition fuel through the 2030s, and getting oil and gas out of the North Sea and using that is actually much better for the environment than shipping it halfway around the world in shipping tankers. That is very environmentally damaging. Much better to use our own and not be beholden to dictators like Vladimir Putin.
May I just say this, because it's
really quick, because I must bring the rest of the panel in.
There is no guarantee that just because you get oil out of the North Sea, which is local, that it'll be used locally. It gets sold on international markets at global prices. Kwasi Kwarteng himself, when he was the energy minister, said, you know, these businesses are not charities. They will sell it to the highest bidder, and that might not be us. So there is no guarantee whatsoever, if you go around having massive amounts of yet more oil and gas coming from the North Sea, that actually gets used here and reduces our emissions here. So what we need to do is to make that green transition, to do it fast, because the bottom line is either we have a managed transition to a green transition and a greener future, or we have chaos. Those are the two choices before us.
No, hang on. I must bring in the rest of the panel. So, Theo, Richard's question originally was, is COP27 realistic when the biggest emitters of CO2 simply aren't there?
Well, we've only got one planet. We all share it. So we've got to start from somewhere. I mean, no one's talked about... We talked about Russia, but if we look at all the CO2 that's coming out of Ukraine with all the bombs and everything, I mean, what damage that actually is doing to the environment and accelerating. But the fact remains, what we can't have, and I use the word Muppets, and it's degrading in some ways, but funny in others. You can't have people causing the disruption...
Hang on, you were going to say Muppets, I think.
Muppets, yes, Muppets. Disruption to the economy of the country by chaining themselves to gantries on the M25, right, which causes even more congestion. And actually, like the gentleman said earlier, makes people turn against what is an incredibly serious point, because they think they're loony bins.
So obviously we haven't got those particular protesters here, but one of the arguments they use is, unless they do something as dramatic as that, people aren't going to listen.
But it's not... Hold on. Do you think people are really taking a message, or the biggest message that's coming out of it is congestion, upheaval, economic downturn? The reality, this is a democracy. We have so many opportunities, like Caroline has, to make our point in a democratic world.
I want those protesters out there, believe me. Peaceful protest is massively important, and it's hugely under attack by this government.
OK, hang on, I'm going to bring Emily in. Hang on. I need to bring Emily in, because Emily's not had a chance to ask this question.
I don't mind that. I don't mind it. And as long as it is peaceful, you consider it to be peaceful. But when policemen get injured, people get injured, drivers get injured, we have massive congestion on the road, inconvenience, people not be able to get to hospital appointments, running our lives. You consider the fallout damage peaceful. Well, why don't they just chain themselves to Westminster, where all you politicians sit, right, and get you guys that we're paying you to concentrate on doing your job properly, rather than inconveniencing the rest of the nation?
I have some sympathy with the idea.
That would be a really good idea.
I have some sympathy with the idea of focusing your protest where the decision makers are.
Okay.
But could I just quickly share...
I must bring Emily, or else Emily's not going to get a chance to answer this question before the programme ends. Emily.
Labour has a plan,
Caroline.
and Labour's plan includes onshore wind, and it includes nuclear. What it includes is borrowing to invest in a new way of doing things. Of course, you know, we cannot be responsible necessarily for the whole world, but what we can do as a country is show international leadership by doing things the right way. One country could win the race for making sure that we produce energy in renewable ways. Why couldn't it be us? Why can't it be us? Why can't we have the vision to be able to invest properly so that we can be carbon neutral by 2030? We can do it, so long as we believe that we can, so long as we stop the self-hatred, so long as we don't spend our time bickering and actually going, yeah, we've got to do it, let's go for it, and let's put some investment into the hundreds of thousands of jobs that can be created, the new industries that we can support, insulating people's homes. We won't be held to ransom by Putin anymore. We will be able to have cheap energy. We will be able to have good jobs. And do you know what? We'll also be doing our bit for saving the planet. That's the plan we need. We need to have the vision, and we need to be brave and bold about this, and we can do it.